Proverbs 3:9. Honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruit of all thine increase. Next verse. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Honor the Lord with the first fruit. Well, first fruit is a very simple principle. It's when we plant in a place, the first things that come out, that's first fruit. When you plant cassava, the first harvest of cassava is first fruit. When you plant banana, the first harvest of banana is your first fruit. When you plant cocoyam, the first harvest of your cocoyam is first fruit. The very first harvest. He says, if that first one is given to honor God, he said there will be increase. If the first harvest is given to honor God, he said there will be increase. In materialism, or that gospel of materialism, it means to bring your salary, January salary. And January is coming very close. Okay? Bring all of your January offering. Then they will now tell you, if you give God your January offering, the rest of your salary for the year is covered. But then when you now give that January offering, they will now, after they have collected it and they have told you your money for the rest of the year is covered, February they will tell you, if you don't pay your tithe, you will not make heaven. You collected January salary and you say the rest is covered. Now February has not even gone far. You say, if I don't give you the tithe, the tenth, I'm in trouble. And the reason is because when scriptures are not taught well, they will confuse the reader and they will confuse the hearer. Are we in the building here? Now, the fellow who wrote this, Solomon, is teaching Genesis to Deuteronomy. But you are teaching economics. The pastor that is in this forum is teaching economics. The guy teaching this is teaching Genesis to Deuteronomy. So how do you honor the Lord with your first fruit? What does it mean? When the gospel enters a city and we preach the gospel, you are planting the seed. And one man in that city accepts the gospel. That person becomes the first fruit of that gospel. If you are the first person to be born again in your family, you are the first fruit of the gospel in your family. If you are the first person to be born again in a city, you are the first fruit of the gospel in that city. If you are the first person to be born again in your school, you are the first fruit of the gospel in that school. I'm teaching good this morning. Now, if that fellow who accepted Christ in that family decides to be dedicated to the gospel, to honor God with his service of preaching, there will be increase in that family. There will be increase in that city. There will be increase in that school. There will be increase in that village. If that first fruit decides to honor God by making his life a sacrifice to preach, there will be a harvest in that place. That's what Solomon was teaching. That's what Solomon was teaching. Which means when you are the first fruit of your city, or the first fruit of your family, or the first fruit of your college, you become responsible for the harvest of that place. You become responsible. That's why when you now get to the new covenant, when Jesus rose from the dead, Brother Paul identifies Jesus as the first fruit of those who rose. Look at it. 1 Corinthians 15:20. Please pay attention. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse number 20. But now, please pay attention. Is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruit of them that slept? Next verse. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. Next verse. For as in Adam all died, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. So Jesus becomes the first fruit. Why? Because he was planted. Jesus becomes the first fruit. Why? Because he was planted. How do we know that Jesus was planted?